Hello everyone, my name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute. Thanks for joining me for Preston's Ponderings. Well, we're still looking at the horrific events of the Japanese earthquake, the tsunami, and the subsequent events. As more and more prophecy teachers seem to chime in and tell us it's a sign of the end, it's proof we're in the last days. We're trying to share with you some of the genuine biblical signs of the end, demonstrating that those signs of the end appeared in the New Testament era, that is, the first century. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple. The disciples immediately asked him, "Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Now notice they're asking for a sign of the end of the age. I want you to notice something. Jesus, as he answers their question, specifically warns them there shall be famines, earthquakes, perils, etc., etc. But he says, do not be deceived. The end is not yet. In other words, earthquakes were not to be considered as a sign of the imminent end. They were not to be considered a sign that the last days had arrived and were about to be consummated. Isn't there something wrong when modern day prophecy, quote, experts, unquote, point to earthquakes and what have you in our world and say, see, this proves the end is near. When Jesus himself said, look, there are going to be earthquakes, perils, famines, pestilence. These things are the beginning of birth pangs, but the end is not yet. Luke chapter 21 says, the end is not immediately. Okay? So earthquakes are not even a sign of the imminent end. But Jesus did give a very definite, definitive sign of the end. Jesus said, this gospel of the kingdom must be preached into all of the world as a witness to the nations, then comes the end. So the disciples asked Jesus, give us a sign of the end of the age. Jesus said the gospel would be preached in all of the world as a witness to the nations, then comes the end. The completion of the Great Commission would be a sign the end was near. Now watch this. Now I've written a book entitled Into All the World, Then Comes the End. At the very beginning of that book, I present a chart that demonstrates that every single word that is translated as world, earth, creature, etc., etc., that Jesus used to command and to predict the preaching of the gospel into all the world, to all the earth, to every creature, every one of those words is used by the Apostle Paul to say the gospel had been preached into all of the world, to every creature, to all of the earth. Wow! Now notice this. Jesus said the gospel must be preached into all of the world. He used a very distinctive Greek word, oikoumene. Oikoumene means the inhabited world. In the first century, that meant the Roman world. That's what they considered to be all the world. Luke chapter 3 is proof of this. Now watch this. Paul, in Romans 10:18 and following, said the gospel had been preached in all the oikoumene. Jesus said that the gospel was to be preached into all of the world. Greek word, cosmos. Mark 16, Matthew 28, etc. Paul said the gospel had been preached into all of the cosmos and was bringing forth fruit. Jesus said, preach the gospel to every creature, Greek word katisis. Paul said, Colossians 1:23, the gospel has been preached to every creature under heaven. Now, if you wanted to say that the gospel had been preached in fulfillment of what Jesus commanded and predicted, how much better could it be expressed? After all, Jesus said, go preach the gospel to all the nations. Well, guess what? Paul in Romans 16:25 and 26, Romans 1:7 and following, said the gospel had been preached to all the nations. So again, every single word that Jesus used to predict or to command the preaching of the gospel into all of the world, all of the earth, to every creature, is used by Paul to say the gospel had been preached into all of the world, to all of the nations, into all the earth, to every creature. And watch this. Not only did Jesus say, here is a sign of the nearness of the end. Paul said the gospel had been preached into all of the world, just like Jesus said it would be. And then Paul said the end was near. He said the end of the ages has come upon us. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 11. Paul said the night is far spent. The day is at hand. Romans 13 11. He said in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, the time has been shortened. This world is passing away. On and on and on it goes. Not only that, Titus chapter 2, 13 and following, Paul says the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present age, looking for, and the Greek word looking there means an eager, expectant looking. It's imminent looking, or looking for something that is expected to be imminent, looking for the appearance of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. So Jesus said the gospel would be preached in all the world, then comes the end. Paul said the gospel had been preached in all the world, the end was near. Folks, we need to accept the biblical testimony that the signs of the end were present in the first century. Since the signs of the end were present in the first century, and since the New Testament writers said the end was near, after the gospel had been preached in all the world, it's time that we bring our views of eschatology into alignment with what they said. Jesus said, preach the gospel in all the world, then comes the end. New Testament writers, the gospel has been preached into all the world, the end is near. They were right. All of the so-called prophecy experts pointing at the earthquake, pointing at the tsunami and saying the end is near, they're not right. Thanks for joining me for Preston's Ponderings. We'll have more. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the flip side.